Even further out, ordinary brick houses are hit by the blast like this. This is the effect on houses over an area of more than 50 square miles. Again, what is the effect of this massive power on the unprotected human body? The major injuries come from the secondary effects of blast, impact with flying debris and solid walls. As far as Walthamstow or Hampstead, people can be carried by winds of 150 miles an hour and thrown against buildings. Arm and leg fractures are likely, with a high proportion of skull injuries. Closer in, the pressure itself may even rupture the lungs and burst the eardrums. However, the most widespread injuries are from flying glass. As the pressure wave sweeps outwards from St. Paul's, it shatters and bursts every window in the city from the M4 services near Heathrow to Hornchurch in Essex, an area of 500 square miles. This is what flying glass can do to a pumpkin. There are 600,000 people in this royal wedding crowd, stretching all the way back to Trafalgar Square. All the people you can see, plus another 250,000, will die immediately from the blast. 1.5 million more will be seriously injured. The immediate effects of even a single weapon are awesome. What can city dwellers do to protect themselves? We shall look firstly at the options open to a couple living in the North London suburb of Finsbury Park. Their street is between 3 and 4 miles from St. Paul's, mainly Edwardian terraced houses. Joy and Eric live at the southern end. He's a musician. She works for a bank. What could they do for protection? The Home Office published this pamphlet, Protect and Survive, in May 1980. Most of the booklet tells you how to shelter from the fallout that may follow an attack. There's little on how to deal with the immediate effects. However, there is advice on fire prevention. Newspapers and other combustibles should be thrown away. Buckets of water should be kept handy for putting out fires. And windows should be whitewashed to reflect the heat flash. The remaining advice is how to shield an inner room from fallout, and how to build a refuge within that room. These preparations took all day. There was a problem in finding enough heavy materials for the necessary shielding. There was no advice on blast protection. How would they survive at 3¼ miles? As far as heat is concerned, quite well. Although the paint on the windows will burn, the whitewash keeps 80% of the heat out. There may be fires in unprotected houses nearby, but Joy and Eric should survive, at least for 17 seconds. After that, the blast demolishes their terrace of houses. There's no guarantee that these measures would protect you from blast if you were much closer than 6 to 8 miles from ground zero. However, as we'll see, any shelters that survive further away can still be effective against fallout. A second Home Office booklet was published early in 1981. It deals with more elaborate shelters. None of them are last-minute affairs. Type 1 is for digging outdoors in a time of international crisis. You need quite a large garden. It has to be well away from buildings and large trees to avoid falling debris.
Stick the fork in and
Many London gardens will not be big enough to satisfy this requirement. It's a shallow 18-inch trench with built-up earth walls, held in place initially with wooden doors. These are later used for the roof. It's suggested that all this timber, doors, planks, braces, should come from cannibalizing your own house. But would people really start to move indoors unless they were certain an attack was coming? At the end of the first day's digging, the trench started to fill with water. By the following morning, this had happened.
Bloody hell. Look at this. It's filled up. Oh.
The local water table was about a foot below the surface. There were 8 inches of water to be bailed out. They persevered, although in practice the continuous flooding would have made their shelter uninhabitable. The next problem would have been especially difficult for those with small gardens. The earth excavated from the shelter was only a fraction of that needed to cover it. In fact, an additional 4.5 tons had to be imported. Luckily, the ground wasn't frozen. There were no underground sewage pipes or conduits in the way, and the couple had the necessary time to build it. It's not known in practice how much, if any, warning would be given for shelter building. Building this took the equivalent of a long, hard weekend for 2. The total cost of materials, not including the extra soil, was about £200. How does such a structure withstand heat and blast? The earth cover stands up to heat very well, although any exposed wood may be charred. However, the blast pressure at this range is 4 times what the shelter's designed for. So it wouldn't protect this couple from the immediate effects. In this kind of shelter, they'd need to be at least 5 or 6 miles away for proper blast protection. The booklet has another design that's more resistant to blast. It's a kit of parts, obtained in peacetime and assembled in a crisis. It's designed for indoors, for a basement or ground floor room. When it's put together, it's very like the World War II Morrison shelter. The steel frame took several hours. Then the fallout shielding, layers of bricks. This took most of a day. Total cost, with bricks, £800 to £1,200. It's claimed that it will withstand a 2-story house collapsing on top of it. But although the shelter itself survives at 3 miles, it's right in the center of the fire zone. This is the area where almost everything that will burn is on fire, even after the blast. The fires burn up available oxygen. Inside your shelter, you might not only be roasted, but suffocated. For this reason alone, the shelter is unsatisfactory unless it's at least 4.5 to 5 miles away. And even then there may be no one to dig you out. From here on, the options take increasing amounts of time and money. There are now about 30 firms who will sell and install for you a purpose-built nuclear shelter in any combination of steel, fiberglass and concrete. The amount you pay depends on size, sophistication and level of comfort. Most are between £8,000 and £20,000. Even with a second mortgage or cost sharing, they're probably beyond the range of all but a fraction of the population. This one is typical. It's a buried steel tube and costs about £10,000. Inside it's about 15 feet long and there's space for 5 to 7 people to live in moderate comfort, supported by an air filtration system. This is pumped by a hand crank. There's ample storage space and running water from a self-contained tank. A lavatory flushes the waste into an underground pit. The blast proofing in most shelters will withstand 1 to 3 atmospheres of overpressure. Here it's 3 atmospheres. The whole thing's buried under 6 feet of earth and takes about a week to install and equip. The problems include making sure you're in it, not outside when the bomb goes off. There's also the question of neighbours. You may be the only one in your area with a shelter.